Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. This is also the first video for 2022, so Happy New Year everyone, and my best wishes for the next year, whether it's in gaming, in EVE, or in real life. I hope you all have an awesome year, and well, lucky for me, the fireworks in GTA 4.4 are also going off right now. When it comes to the EVE news in general, obviously a pretty slow week. These were the holidays after all, and so we shouldn't expect major announcements or anything like that to drop. So yeah, not really anything too special. I think the sale is still happening, where you get like 50% off, basically for 3 months Omega and 3, plex bundles or something like that. Let's take a quick look at the new Eden store and see if there's anything happening here. We still have a couple of sales happening here as well. SW Fire Sale for the Stradios, pretty good looking skin for 33 plex. Feels like that's actually kind of reasonable. You even have some apparel for sale as well. Get a couple of new radioactive reclamation goggles, so that's for us miners, and obviously the Yule Star skin if you want to be ready for next year with the countdown and things like that. You can still go after that one. Lots of new reclamation skins considering the mining update, and yeah, a couple more sales down here. So if you're hunting for skins, it's definitely a good time to consider looking on the new Eden store. When it comes to the services, we're not really noticing anything special here. So yeah, the sale is probably just on the website. Let's dive in then and see what the impact will be on the market. As always, we start with plex and stuff coming in at 155. There we go. And when it comes to plex, you may have seen that on the ticker as well. We've got a little bit of pressure happening again, despite the fact that we basically had this sale happening for quite a decently long time. I think over a week at this point. We did have this bump up to above 2.9 million for the prices of plex, but we've normalized again, and on the chart you can see we're just above the 2.75 million. Volumes have normalized too, so I don't see that much extra supply coming online, but perhaps there is enough to just keep prices in check. For the sellers in GTA, 2.9 million. If we include the perimeter trading tower, just below 2.9 million. Buyers coming in above 2.7 million, and including the trading tower, same stuff, just above 2.7 million ISK. So quite an okay price, I think, definitely high on the yearly average. But these are, of course, the holidays. There is stuff happening, and perhaps there's enough reason to try to grab plex, including, of course, the big rebalance that happened to the mining ships, which I think will also have driven like extractors, injectors, and things like that. Before we get there, here are the multiple pilot training certificates. I think this is more of what I'm expecting after sales end and things like that. A gradual upside for multiple pilot training certificates on that 5-day moving average on the chart for sure. We're heading for almost 1.5 billion for the sellers, especially in GTA. We're getting pretty damn close to that, and buyers are just shy of 1.4 billion for the multiple pilot training certificate. The skill extractors should follow plex pretty closely, and yeah, you've got this, it's a little bump in price that was very quickly absorbed by the market, and we're basically back on a sideways pattern for the whole month of December. If we ignore that one, just above 330 million on the chart. It is 326 now for the first sellers in the Tranquility Trading Tower. GTA goes up to 338, showing that GTA trade is not insignificant. We get average price above that 330 mark, and buyers are coming in at 316 million for a pretty narrow margin, especially within the Tranquility Trading Tower. That's just like a 10 million margin. That's not a lot. On the skill injector front, here are the large skill injectors, and that do have a little bit of dive down to 650 million, but are already bouncing back here as well. So a bit more of a pullback, but also from a 1-year high range at almost 680 million. So I think here a little bit of extra usage in skill injectors because of the mining rebalance might definitely have kept us in higher prices longer and better than plex themselves. I think here then the sale that's happening will have rolled through everything a little bit, and then we get this decline, but the bump is quite significant all of a sudden. We're clearly stalling to go any lower from this price point, and it is 660 million for the sellers. JITA going up to 680 almost again. All right, back to that high range, and then the buyers are almost at 630 million. I'm seeing that upwards pressure that does start to show up here, I think, on a little bit more interest. Then we get the small scale injectors that are still really doing their own thing, except you can see here today's daily average find its way back above this range. So I think that the bump is happening right now basically for skill injectors. Sellers are coming in at 137 for the sellers, above 140 again as well for the sellers in JITA itself, and 120 for the buyers. There's still a bit of margin here between sellers and buyers that's causing this lower bottom for small scale injectors, but my opinion is that this will become a bottom and that we'll start to see a little bit of upward pressure, especially if we look at trading certificate, the skill extractors that are stalling here as well. And yeah, I think in general in January we should see just, you know, general gameplay come into view. It is winter time here in Europe and in the US, so I think we could be up for a little bit of inflation on this one. We'll see if I'm right or not. We do have a peak that has shown up here in November at this point, and the horizon that I'm looking at the moment is basically what to do between now and FanFest, and that's not difficult, of course, not easy, I would say, to decide, because we really don't know what's going to happen except for compression coming to the game. Finally, we get the daily alpha injectors for the injector market. A little bit of downwards pressure on this one, back below 40 million on today's daily average. Still 41 to 42 million for the sellers, but 37.5 million, showing a little bit less demand all of a sudden here. Good news for alpha players, I would say. Your average for 40 million for a daily alpha injector is definitely in check. Which again, it's a little bit of speculation on my part, but I think here a CCP intervention with a daily alpha injector sale did exactly what they wanted. Keep this item affordable and doable as a routine for alpha players. For the final item here, we get the hypercores that are, well, doing the same thing as my general intuition. Here we get a little bit of sales action that's rolling through the market that brought us just below 300,000 ISK for this, but then the bump is here, and from here on out, well, we'll have to see what we expect next. But as I've said, my first intuition on this one would be that a little bit of upward pressure and perhaps testing these high points might definitely be in the books. 300,000 plus for the sellers, 288,000 for the buyers. We will of course see in the upcoming days and weeks if I'm right or wrong. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 8 minutes. Alright, pretty good time for the first one of the year. Let's start as always with titanium, and well, after doing a very sharp increase from 4.5 to 5.5 ISK on these daily averages here, we had to do a little bit of a pause here. We couldn't keep going to the moon like some other stocks, but yeah, we had to do a little bit of a break, but we went below 5 ISK, but not by too much. And you can see we're starting to basically get there as well on that 20-day moving average. We're talking within JITA itself, because these sellers, of course, you know, are not exactly going to be part of the equation. Practically 5 ISK for the sellers, and I do see a little bit of supply drops in the numbers, right? You get a couple with 100-200 million units, but then you get a browse a little bit for a 400 million units, so availability does seem to have gone down a little bit, and buyers coming in at 478, pretty narrow margin, very close to 5 ISK. Good news for high-sec miners, I would say. You're definitely getting the best price for titanium you have in like 6 months or more, so that's not so bad. Can the other high-sec minerals do something similar? No, we get an opposite move on pyrite. Very interesting to see these move in different ways. Pyrite is going back down, and in fact today's daily average is very low, towards 15 ISK. We're talking 1640 for the sellers, but 1512 for the buyers. Buyers are dropping out of this market, dropping their price quite drastically, and supply here is still quite respectable. level, dominated by 10 plus million, 50 plus million unit sell orders, 200 million here. For pyrite, that is actually quite a lot, especially if we look at what was happening here in the titanium market. And I'm guessing that for some reason demand is just slacking, and this is why we got lower prices. So clearly your priority should not be pyrite, but should definitely move towards titanium. And let's see for Mexel what that one is doing. Plateauing at the slightly higher range. You might get a couple more messages, of course. It is the new year during this recording, but let's keep going. So Mexel plateauing at 70 ISK range on the chart. Not bad as well, considering the price in the last 6 months or so. We are talking 73 already for the sellers in JITA and above 70 for the buyers. Very important psychological barrier, I would say. A 63 million unit buyer coming in at 70.01 should definitely, I think, strengthen or, you know, give a nice foundation for this 70 ISK range for Mexlon. So yeah, HiSec miners, Mex and titanium should be your go-to. Pyrite is seemingly not appreciated by the market at the moment. Next up, we've got Isogen, obviously one of my favorites because my prediction came out a little bit on this one at least. Went up to 125 and is still plateauing here. I think we're bumping into one of those sell orders at this point that still has a pretty big number. There it is, 125 with 250 million units. So we'll have to slowly claw our way through that one. 53 million for the buyers, but for another pretty big sell order here, excuse me. But those buyers are coming in at 120, so that's a very narrow margin compared to the sellers at 121.8. And yes, what is happening here is to be expected, except maybe pullbacks to 100. If we don't see too many of those, then I think we can chew through these 250 million units or something like that of Isogen, and it actually open up even higher potentials for this mineral. And so at the moment we are bumping into those, in my opinion, old reserves, but I'd say we're set for potentially even higher prices later down the line. It is good to see that, you know, we keep testing that, we keep bumping up into that. That should slowly ebb away at these units here as well, and those buyers are staying very competitive right underneath these buyers, these sellers, excuse me. So yeah, this is still happening, right? I'm sure CCP actually has the data on the Isogen reserves that still exist out in the game, but you know, we mentioned that while the game was in this era of plentiful resources, Isogen really became that byproduct. It was the largest casualty of when it comes to its price potential, because it was just so ubiquitous, so available, and this is the result. Of course, it is the one that takes the longest to normalize and then to you know, find that price range compared to active demand and supply. Next up, we've got the Noxium market that is in that spot, in my opinion, and we saw from the video that production of these new mining crystals requires, at least for the Tech 1 versions, Noxium. Now, it was mentioned that, you know, that it was the same previously, but I do think perhaps a little bit of a an increased need will exist in the game now, since, you know, your better yields are from your mining barges, no longer oracles, who don't need those crystals, and a bit of a rush, of course, during the patch, because it is all new. People want to test it all out. So I think there is, you know, the patch, the new crystals are partly to blame for this increased price, but it is possible that in general there is just more need for Noxium and that the supply isn't there, which I think eventually Isogen will find itself in that situation as well. So we're talking almost 1500 ISK for a piece of Noxium, 1400 for the buyers. They have to go up as well, right? That is the really, I think, the strength of this type of a market. If you're starting to run out of them, the buyers have no choice. They have to go up in price as well. And this does start to make it look pretty interesting to even risk a cheap ship, going to a low sec system where you don't think there's too many people, hunt for a little bit of Noxium. I mean, you are definitely getting a pretty nice return on this one, and the increase in price over the last month or so, quite impressive as well, from 1000 to almost 1500 ISK, 50% increase, showing that I think Isogen and Noxium will become very expensive and will also have that volatile potential, because of course Who knows what happens in low-sec and blockades and things like that. Big wars could really disrupt the situation there quite heavily. And for Noxium, I think this is quite a nice opportunity as well. If you happen to still hold on to these, then you can sell at a pretty damn good price. Next up, we've got a Zydrine that is basically confirming the gains, managing to make its way back above 1,000 disc, and is seemingly here to stay. We're talking 1,060 plus, heading towards 1,100 pretty decently quickly on the sellers, and buyers are forced above 1,000 disc as well. This is also a market where imports are needed, and so buyers have to come up towards those sellers if they want a chance to actually grab the Zydrine. No one in their right mind is just going to dump to buyers, like let's say below 1,000 disc at this point for Zydrine. So this is what's happening here. Basically, the forerunner on the announcement, I think Zydrine was the first one where the market speculated. This might just mean less availability when it comes to the patch, and turns out that they were right on the money. We're above 1,000 and we are staying there. Then we've got Megasite, that's basically the late bloomer of the bunch, because this one did not move back, let's say, above 600 or anything like that on the announcement. But as things are rolled out, here it is, we actually spiked up to 800 disc and are settling above 700 disc, which is still a nice gain for Megasite. 720 for the sellers, 709 for the buyers. You can see how aggressive they have to be here as well. Yeah, higher prices for minerals. You know, for a lot of them, that seems to be the case. Pyrite is really the anomaly on the list that's dropping off. So my tactic at the moment, I would say, I would definitely feel good when it comes to selling titanium, when it comes to selling Mexlon, Noxium, or any of the null-sec minerals, in fact. Yeah, Pyrite, we just hold off on that, try to not spook the market, and hopefully that one can make a comeback as well. If you're hunting for higher prices at the moment, it is looking pretty good. Then we finally have Morphite, which probably won't have higher prices. After all, availability of the by far most expensive mineral has increased and has doubled with the patch, and so that one just landed on that 50k and is here to stay, which is in my opinion still very expensive. 55,000 for the sellers, 52.5 for the first buyer, 51,000 for most. So this is that healthy 10% margin. I think the market has accepted that in the current situation, Morphite for above 50,000 disc is what you're going to pay for it, which is still very expensive, which to me makes a lot of sense as well, that this one then has that downwards pressure that you can see here on more availability when CCP already doubled or increased Morphite availability in the game. And then with the patch, we got another leg down on the doubling of resources in general. But my speculation is that it's still taking a lot of effort, at least as much if not more effort, to actually bring those double resources to the market. And so the only ones that are really suffering price-wise is Morphite, is your go-to, is your super value, is the one that you will always focus on first. And so I think that's the story here in minerals, and looks like perhaps Pyrite has just become a little bit too available all of a sudden. Next up, we have the PI market coming in at 18 minutes. There we go. Let's go over these. We went over what's been happening in the PI market in general. I think over the last one pretty well. So just to quickly recap that one, very strong summer and early fall here, September, October, for the advanced PI materials, because their increased need in the building of larger ships really meant increased demand that supported these higher prices. But then CCP announced that they were going to rebalance that situation, because of course it's not really very economical to build large ships in EVE Online at the moment. And the place that they were going to hit was PI. And at first it was, we're just going to reduce the amount of advanced PI materials or PI materials needed in ship construction. And then it was, we're going to make PI materials available in moon mining as well. And then we got this massive dump here, and then they pulled back on the second bit, but they're still, you know, if they're planning to rebalance the production of ships, as far as we know, it's gonna be in PI first and foremost, which is not good for the price, of course. That's why you're getting this hesitation pattern here, for instance, in broadcast. I think in general, not good news. We don't know of any different situation on this, so we're talking less than 1.2 million for the sellers, very close to that for the buyers. So there are probably some speculators out there that are saying, I'm actually going to buy at these prices and be ready if CCP decides on something else all of a sudden, then that could be a very good buy. So you get a super narrow margin, but you have plenty of dumpers as well that are just, willing to sell those broadcast nodes, probably because during this period they switched their production cycles, so we have more availability as well, and they just want to get rid of that and get their ISK for their PI efforts. Construction Blocks is making its way back to 8,000 ISK. Not bad, a little bit against my personal expectation, but it is of course basically a recovery from a one-year low point at 6,000 ISK, and it is still the high range, but a pretty average range of an item that historically speaking costs something like 10,000 ISK. It's 7.9 for the sellers, 7.5 for the buyers. All right, they are forced up a little bit. Interesting to see that increased demand here. Let's see if Construction Blocks can, for this time, hold on to these gains and stay within this range, or will we see another crash as we've seen 1, 2, and 3 of these before. It's going to be interesting, and I think the others might just give us a clue. Here is consumer electronics, and that would not be a positive clue. Look at that, going down to a one-year low point, yet again below 5,000 ISK a couple of days ago. 5,500 for the sellers, 5.1 for the buyers. And this is the real problem with PI, of course. There is just overproduction. It is passive, it is easy, and you can see here we're clearly lacking in demand when it comes to the volumes of the sell orders and the buy orders, or the amount of them, I should say. Then we've got coolants, or one exception, which for me is really awesome, of course, because I do produce coolants. My philosophy for PI has always been that I want to focus on something that gets consumed rather than that is part of the construction cycle of, let's say, ships, materials, and things like that. And coolants is part of fuel blocks, which do get consumed constantly, and that does mean potentially that constant demand that can be built on. And so here we're well above 10,000 ISK, which is an historically normal price, but 12,500 to 13,000 for the sellers, 11.5 for the buyers is actually, even historically speaking, a great price for coolant. It's easy to produce, high sec, wherever you want. Gas planets are very ubiquitous, and that's where you can very easily make a lot of coolants. So our one exception here is really good, and in fact I'm selling coolants in Amar at the moment, trying not to spook the market because I do have big reserves, but it is the one here that's really worth it at the moment, in my opinion. Cryoprotectant solutions went up to 120,000, and actually some of you guys pointed out what happened here. We're slowly going back down, 117 for the sellers, 108 for the buyers, and basically in the Winter Nexus event you had implant BPCs that dropped, and so Cryoprotectant solutions was always a play on CCP, from my perspective at least, on CCP introducing new implants, because I still personally think that that's a possibility. There's still some gaps, and a new gap that's going to be created when it comes to implant sets. The first one is Edencom ships, so those still don't have implants as far as I know. I think that could be something that CCP will eventually do or work on. And then of course compression moving to ships might just introduce new implants as well. What I was not thinking of was that potentially, implant BPC dropping could also have this effect. And so here it is, you had a sell opportunity at 120,000 ISK, and during this period here, I mentioned it very, very often, you could have very easily bought well below 100,000 ISK, 20-25% profit, pretty easily doable on this pattern. And so I'm really happy. I think we're keeping this one for sure in the PI materials market, but we have to keep this pattern in mind as well when it comes to our trading, is that implants can definitely be part of the reward structures for events, and when they are, that's when you've got this type of stuff happening, this sell opportunity. So very, very good, awesome information. Glad it's here. Next up, you get enriched uranium tied to fuels, not as good as coolants, but still above 9,000 ISK and staying there. You can clearly see that on the 1 year chart. We gained quite a bit on this one as well. 9.2 for the sellers, 8.8 for the buyers, not that much in availability. Is it being sold in Tranquility Trading Tower? A little bit, but not even competing price-wise. So yeah, I would say still looking decent, not as good as coolants again, but decent for this fuel-related PI material. Integrity response drones, advanced PI. So here I think the market is still not sure, right, what to make of everything that CCP announced, and for now here it looks like lower prices are what they decide on. 1.6 million for the sellers, 1.2 million for the buyers. Mechanical parts tied to fuels, another one back to 8,000 disc, which is still not awesome, but clearly on the 1 year chart this is not a bad place to be. 7.9 for most sellers, getting up to 8.81 very quickly, and then 7,200 for the buyers. A little bit less demand here, clearly a bit more margin that's opened up on these prices, but pretty reasonable as well, and very easy to make. Barren planets are also all over the place. Then we've got nanites. I thought this was tied to implants, but perhaps not the right implant set. This is also tied to the production of what was it? I think nanite repair paste. Of course, they're nanites, nanite repair paste. And so this one, I kind of want to keep this one here as well, but it is 5,000 disc, which is like one of the cheapest refined PI materials at the moment. 5.2 for the sellers, 4.9 for the buyers, which is to me a little bit strange because it has this consumption component as well through nanite repair paste, but I guess it's not as consistent as fuel blocks, of course, that are basically, if you want to do industry, you gotta consume fuel blocks. This is far more niche. You gotta repair something, so that's probably why we don't have this move up here. And yeah, this price is really not great, but who knows when this one could move and maybe normalized compared to basically all the other refined PI materials that are finding their way, at least some of them, to that 7,000-8,000 disc range. Consumer electronics though starting to join nanites. Then we get our nano factories. Yep, same story, right? High point in September, decline on everything that CCP was doing, and of course declining from a high point as well. You don't stay there forever, but then a little bit of a bounce on the change of mind for PI, but lately market really not sure about any of this. 770,000 for the sellers, 700,000 for the buyers. Very cheap. Organic motor applicators, right? More bad news on this one as well, staying really low, at least 8-9 month low at this one as well. 700,000 for the sellers, 650 for the buyers. We should put back the GTF filter on this one. Then we get recursive computing module for advanced PI materials. Yeah, that's also not exactly the chart you're looking for better prices. Trying to get back to that 900,000, I would say. 890 for most sellers, 840 for one. But buyers, they're below 800,000 disc, and I think it's going to take a lot to move them back. Then we get robotics, tied to fuels on this chart, not that great and historically terrible. 65,000 for something that usually costs 100,000 disc, 66 for the sellers, 63 for the buyers. It's a little bit more demand that has kept that price slightly higher from the lows, but this is clearly not a good one to be producing at the moment. Then we get self-harmonizing power cores. Advanced PI guys, I'm sorry, but the bad news just keeps rolling back below that 125, just above that for the sellers. 1.1 for the buyers, but I think that, and you can see it drops off below that and towards a million very quickly. I think those buyers are basically sensing the hesitation, and they're they're willing to very quickly pull those prices back down. Sterile conduits, exact same story, back on that 9 month low. 920,000 for the sellers, 850,000 for the buyers. Yukomi superconductors able to get on that average 75k. Still not great for a specialized PI materials, but yeah, the very general thing to keep in mind when it comes to PI here with remain frames, right? Same story, back below 1.5 million. Buyers opening up that 100,000 gap again. I think we could decline very quickly on these, unfortunately. There is a little bit of demand here and there, but it's not looking good for higher prices. And that's that general thing that I wanted to mention, is that we have to remember that this is something that CCP has mentioned. Their philosophy is that they want activity in the game to be rewarded, and PI is one of the most passive things you can do in the game. So these historically bad prices are in line with what CCP has announced and what they're thinking. Next up, advanced moon materials, coming in at 29 minutes. There we go. Let's take a look at these carbonites. I'm honestly not expecting too much to move here either over the holidays. So for the carbides, we basically have the confirmation of the premium compared to last year, right? A 150 range up to 175 range. We're at 176 to 165, pretty stable, pretty decent. Then we've got the titanium carbide for Caldari dropping off a little bit, but again, 150 to 175 range, right? This could very easily bounce back from this. We're talking 164 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. So it's just more supply that has closed up the gap, but those buyers are still pretty aggressive. And then we've got Ferrite carbide for Minmatar, right? A 125 range to 150 range. Also a little bit of pressure at the tail end. That does seem to be the case again, 140 to 134. But look at that, it's supply. And those buyers, they're aggressive enough to stay right under that supply price. So I would not be surprised if suppliers would stop considering these prices, and now we could find our way back to that, margin that we are paying since the industry changes in general in April. And then finally we get, I think, our exception on this one, tungsten carbide for Amar, but nope, look at that, the clawback is happening right here. So this one for the second time went back below 150, which was the range about a year ago, but it's already made its way back. 156 now for the sellers, 143 for the buyers. Bit more margin between sellers and buyers, but yeah, that's a pattern that we're seeing, right? Where supply comes in when the prices are high, managed to get very close to their previous average price, but then when it gets too low and too close to those buyers, they just hold off, and then you get that breathing room, and so that new range has clearly been created in the carbide markets. It's not completely crazy, right? It's up a little bit, but it's there very, very clearly. And then we've got our metamaterials, which is, I always have to look a little bit as to where they are. Here we are, photonic metamaterials for Galente. And yeah, our first couple of volatile items are here as well, which is my hope that this will eventually translate into more volatility in Tech2 ships. At the moment, photonic metamaterials is going back down less than 15,000 ISK. 14.3 for the sellers, 13.78 for the buyers though, and that is definitely from the 11,000 that we started off at. Still a pretty big premium, so a slow, pretty unnaturally slow for an EVE Online market, I would say, recovery on the price, would just mean that it's not that easy to just plug a gap that gets created in these metamaterials, which could again be good for volatility down the pipeline like Tech2 ships. Let's see if anything else is happening. Where is the non-linear metamaterials for Caldari? Well, all right. It's another one that went to like a low point of 17.5 not that long ago and is back at 22.5. It's not super volatility, but at least, right, you've got the wave that these highs went down and down and down, these lows went up and up and up. That is stopping. We are starting to see a little bit more of a range between these prices for the metamaterials here as well. 22,250, not a lot of supply, so we're back on the high side of things, but buyers forced to follow is very interesting. 21,100 for those buyers as well, so they're on that high point when just a couple of weeks ago, right, they could have probably bought well below this range as well, 17.5, something like that. So that's another one that, to me, gives me hope for volatility. Let's see if there's anything else happening. Photonic metamaterials for Amar. All right. Bit of surprise, but right, you can see again those lower highs and highs and highs on the April change. That's really where everything hit the fan basically, and then those lows, right, they're just not really doing anything too special. Very stable period here in November, and finally we have our first breakout highest point in the last 6 months or so. We're talking 22.7 for the sellers and 21.7 for the buyers as well. Pretty narrow margin forced up on this move. Impressive. Very cool. Let's see if we finally get this for Terra's metamaterials for Amar as well. No, that one is still clearly within that pattern, right? You can see highs, lower, lower, and this one is still lower as well. Low points, stable, and then going back up from that one dip here. But all three other metamaterials are starting to see breakout prices and ranges we haven't seen in quite a while. Let's see if that trend can continue. Our other metamaterials, those in general have been depressed, with some of them trying to do stuff, but my expectation has always been that they would be flattened quite quickly. Here is fermionic condensates, pretty stable at the current range, 65 to 61. Not that much to say, it's even a normal spread I think as well. Then we get a ferrogel, there is that bump, right? But then there is the immediate response. Compare that to that, where was it? Was it here? No, was it here? Yeah, compare that to this response, how long it takes to the market, and it can't even get back to like the average 12.5k. For ferrogel, just crushed to a 1 year low point. That is a completely different dynamic. We're starting to crawl our way out of that. 30,000 plus for the sellers, almost 30,000 for the buyers. But any sustained higher prices on the other advanced materials, I'm not seeing them just yet. At least it's a little bit of volatility here and there as well, though. Fullerites, yeah, again, just above 700, 730 to just below 700. So that's also still that, you know, lower volatility, pretty damn low prices. Hypersynaptic fibers, bit of a bump. That was all right in 2 steps, but below 9,000 disc, that's like below almost the entire chart, and we're at 9.2 to 9,000 for the buyers, so don't expect too much to happen here. Nanotransistors made its way above 4,500, which on this chart looks like a pretty good jump. But if we remember correctly, 5,000 disc was a baseline price for a pretty significant period, so 4.5 to 4.1. Still not great, and that other difference here again, we've got that pretty rough 10% margin between sellers and buyers. You're getting nowhere close to that on these metamaterials where those buyers are way closer. So this again means to me that we are going to crush back down decently easily. Phenolic composites, right, doing that step back down decently quickly right here, and not even from like a high point or an above average price point or something like that. Just gets back below 1500, 1430 to 1350. Low prices, unfortunately, that's the story here. Our new ones still not moving that much. Pressurized oxidizers and reinforced carbon fibers, nothing to say here just yet. We're keeping them in there. They are advanced moon mats, of course. I think the chart just needs more time. And maybe they are stable enough as well in general. And then finally, we've got our ceramic fibers, which again, you know, really, really low. Not the best place to be trying to sell, I think. Let us see if this has translated in some more volatility in Tech 2 or not. I'm not willing to say buy now and hunt for that volatility, keep an eye on it every single day just yet. But last time I think we saw some more interesting tidbits, so let's see what's happening. Tech 2 ships 3705. There we go. Let's get started here on the Basilisk, and dropping off very sharply, but you can see here a data point at almost 240 million and a 210 million last 3 months. We are going back down, so let's see how bad it is. Less than 190 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. Let's see if we can get that 185 ish on the chart. That should be around here, I think. So you're definitely buying very, very low. But if we look at it from this way, this is like the sharpest increase and the sharpest drop off we've had in quite a while. Not yet to the high prices that we would want to see, of course, but it's definitely pretty interesting to see this first bit of a wave that also breaks this downwards pattern of those high points and then those low points that just, you know, don't move that much either. So first tiny little wave in the Basilisk. So again, not yet here to say that buy now and next week you'll have profit in the Basilisk, but definitely something to keep in mind, and another buy opportunity if you haven't done so already. Here's the Cerberus. That one is still in that pattern. You can see these low points still slowly ebbing down and down. Those high points, excuse me, and then here, yeah, not exactly where we want to be. Can you buy below 200 million? 206 for the buyers, 219. I would not still try to buy Cerberus at this point. You had an opportunity here in August, here in October, and probably here as well last week. But yeah, I'm really looking for those below the chart types of prices, and for me that's still what we're doing, but let's see if we get more signs. Unfortunately no. Guardian again back on that stable price point. You could have easily bought, I'd say, below 170 on 2 occasions in October and early December. You're still there, 169 for the buyers, 175 for those sellers. So if you haven't and you want to get in on that potential Tech 2 train, I'd say the Guardian is still in a good spot for that as well. Then we've got the Hound. I think that was indeed our barometer, or our canary, hopefully in the coal mine for more volatility to come. 32.5 million, high point for the year. Very sharp drop off though, which is what you're looking for, of course, when you're looking for volatility. Right back on that 25 million, 26 almost for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. So not enough momentum to create another buy opportunity below 22.5. But here is that volatility that of course is very, very tradable. It does require that you buy at the right time and that you keep a close eye on the market, because in a matter of a week, 10 days, you can see that sell opportunity. So here is what we are hunting for, hoping for to come back in general in the market, which it used to do quite often. Next up, we've got our Iquitursa, and all right, still not really a spike that is that impressive, but the trend break is again that we've got high points that are getting higher, and the low points are clear. Below 600 million would be a nice buy price for Iquitursa. Right now they're selling for 714, buyers are at 650, but yeah, not that long ago right here, probably could have bought below 600, could have definitely bought below 600, could have definitely bought below 600. And it's a big investment, and it's definitely risky to do so in a Triglavian ship. But of course, because it's so big, that also means that a 600 to 715 million sell price, that is not a bad trade, of course. Next up, we've got the Ishtar. All right, it's trying. I would say that it is trying. At least we match the previous spike on this one. It's clearly still way too low, not enough, right? Buy when the chart hits 200 or below, so that you can buy really low. 198 for the first seller here, 193 for the buyers. All right, if you want to buy an Ishtar below 195 million, which is somewhere around here, I think, you can do so. So this is probably not a bad time to take a look at the Ishtar if you haven't done so already. We're basically forming this other downward switch right here on the Ishtar, with sellers coming in below 200 million ISK. Then we've got our Manticore, still not right. You can clearly see we're still on that downward slope, hitting constantly against that 25 million. And then when, of course, this happens, you get average prices below 24 million. That's your buy opportunity. Right now, 27 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers. I'd say you're too late. I mean, you're buying on that 25 million, which is not that bad, but as I've been saying for the last couple of months, I'm really looking for those very best buy prices, which the Manticore is not in at the moment, in my opinion. Then we get the Munin. That looks interesting as well. From the opposite perspective, we're not starting to build up highs, but we are testing the 1-year low point here just a couple of days ago, hitting that 180 on the chart, 182 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. That's unfortunate, right? Get rid of these guys, buy below 180, no brain. If you're interested in that Munin investment, keep in mind though, daily volumes are very low. But at least this is a low point that potentially we are seeing, at least on a 5-day moving average, that we haven't seen in like 5-6 months. Then we've got the Nemesis doing the same. All right, that's very interesting. Look at these daily averages, below 21, I'm gonna say. 23 for the sellers, just above 20 million for the buyers. And if you try to get 20 million on the chart, this is, to me, yeah, if you want to be ready, a Nemesis right now makes a hell of a lot of sense on this chart. If you're looking for another sign for volatility, this is not it, because you can see the slope is still just gradually sloping down and sloping down, but eventually we gotta reach bargain prices for a stealth bomber. I mean, it has its uses in EVE Online, in war and things like that. This to me, for the Nemesis, you're buying right on the 20 million mark. Not bad. Be sure that you can, if we go even lower, buy more. So don't spend all your ISK here. But if you want to be ready, I think it does make sense to try to grab one or two. Then we get the Oneros, right? Also still on that downwards volatility slope. 172 to 152. I think we've said that quite often for the Oneros. Be careful for the volumes. But if you want to buy one close to 150, looking at this chart, that still makes a lot of sense to me as well. Then we've got the Panther, 1.25 billion. We haven't seen that in 3 months. Let's hope that we can keep, going back down and going back up a little bit more. Would be awesome to see that in the battleships. Would be a very telling sign, I think. For now, slightly more expensive, but nothing too crazy. The Purifier, completely flat, and that gives me 1 more hour, I hope. Flat on 25 million. So yeah, this is not moving too much, just 24.5 for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. You could have buy opportunities closer to 20, so not the place where I want to be, but you can't get any less volatile than what we're seeing right here on the chart. Then we get the Scimitar that, all right, moved to 1 year low point below 180. So not that great of a move. If only this would like go above 200 million, heading to the 210, we would have another potential wave building. For now, unfortunately, if it goes back down from here, we're still on the downward slope. 194 to 174, you're buying well below 180. Yeah, all these logistics cruisers have had plenty of opportunity to buy at these really low prices. The Widow, stable, maybe slight upward pressure, but not too much. 1.3 billion for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers. And then finally the Zealot, which is also one where you finally have a higher high point, so that this one did break that trend. If they only moved here and then back down there, it would be in our general pattern. But this one is another one that gives me a little bit of hope that volatility comes back. And look at how punishing we're seeing here. So buying well below 180 probably at the moment as well, below 170 even. Sellers coming in at 180 as well, very aggressive. But let's say that you bought for 170 and that you could have sold for 230. That does look like a pretty decent trade. There's still very few and far between, but at least some of them are starting to show potentially a little bit more volatility. Be very, very careful. I'm definitely not in the active tech-to-ship trading mode just yet. We're still hunting for those best bargains, but a couple of signs here and there that it might be coming is pretty good, I think. Next, we've got the Tech 3 ships coming in at 46.30. There we go. As always, we start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor slightly moving back up, so that should mean less supply on this one. Back above the 45 million. 47 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers. And yeah, at least, right, we're not seeing new orders come in for the Confessor, which is back on a slightly more normal pattern. I'm not sure if we spotted this as then a buy opportunity for the Confessor. I definitely mentioned that, if we went even lower and touched on the 40 million, I would definitely have made a move on that. But maybe the market just, saw what was happening and normalized a little bit more quickly. But here, no more Confessors, which makes a lot of sense compared to all of the others. Back at above 45 million, which is okay. Let's see what the others are doing. Here is the Hecade. That's more upwards pressure, above 50. 53 million to 50 million for the buyers. Very expensive, drawing in a little bit of supply, but not that much. All right, that should give the Confessor more breathing room. So if you bought at this low point, as close as possible to 40 million, I think in the next weeks you potentially do have a trade there. Then we get the Jackdaw that's coming off from a high, landing on 50 million. Should see supply here, 88, 89. At least we got some, 20-ish, 51.5 for the sellers, 50 million for the first buyer, but 47 for most. That should continue. We should see more Jackdaws being produced, hopefully driving the price below 50. That should mean more Hecades still has a ways to go to get back below 50. This should give the Confessor room to go back up towards 50 million, where you get a nice little opportunity, which I wanted even lower prices. Maybe here I was thinking too much on how long it took for this Vapel. That did create this massive buy opportunity below 40 million. That doesn't materialize, and this one is pretty stable, which I think makes sense. 48.5 is very reasonable for this Vapel, the least popular one. Compared to Hecate and Jackdaw above 50, that makes sense. Compared to the Confessor, that still doesn't make sense. 43 million for the buyers, regular margin there, not much to say. So for the Tech 3 Cruiser, basically if you manage to buy your Confessors close to 40 million. Hold on to it just a little bit longer. If it ever gets above 50 million, you do have that trade. I do expect that to happen. You can see that there's next to no confessors being brought into the market. The focus is on the Hecate and on the Jackdaw that are still 50 plus. I think that's going to last, and that should mean that the confessor should find its way back above this Svepel, which I think historically it always has been. Then we get our cruisers. Here is the Legion dropping back off from the event that made it super popular all of a sudden. So from a 210 plus down to 180 million for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. Maybe even a little bit of over response, although we're still landing on that low point right here, so it's still reasonable. Yeah, maybe you can buy a Legion on the cheap right now because of that massive drawback. But this is event driven, right? The event was very well tailored towards laser ships, as it turns out, and so that made the Legion your go-to ship for very quickly running everything on the combat side of things. Then we get the Loki, which I thought would be more popular during the event, but yeah, it looks like the Legion took the sweet spot there. A little bit of pressure on this one as well. 190 to 168, pretty decent margin, right? You know, the buy prices are pretty low. If you absolutely want to take those gambles, I think you can with those buy orders. But the Loki, yeah, back on its normal spot as the most versatile, most popular one, 190 compared to 180 for the Legion. My throat is really drying up. I'm gonna take a quick drink. And it's still just regular water. Let's take a look at the Proteus next, least popular one. Still above 180 on this one, 189 as well to 171. Is that the Loki price? All right, bit of surprise here. I think I did see a video recently that may have increased Proteus popularity. 190 to 171 though. It's affordable again, especially in the buy prices. And then the Tengu is actually going for 200 million for the sellers, 185 for the buyers, which, well, maybe it does take the top spot now because it's a PvE platform. And we're not exactly seeing too much action, too much nullsec, massive warfare or anything like that. So for now, the Tengu is the most expensive one with 185 for the buyers as well. If you're looking for cheap buys, yeah, Legion below 170, Loki below 170. If you really want to take a bit of a gamble, because this is way more gambly in my opinion than the Destroyer market, those two, I would not blame you to jump in on that. And then finally, we've got the extra product for the week, a bit of a request and a bit of a test. We are talking the Legion Subsystems. Someone requested that I took a look at those as well. At least Tech 3 subsystems. Can't do all of them, I think that's too much. But let's take a look and see if we can spot some trends and if this is something that we might want to do more of. 52, goddamn, won't write too well, 25. 50 to 25, and then I'll have to look for that a little bit. I think it's gonna be, no, that's not in ships itself. Ship equipment, yeah, it's probably here, and then you can see that I don't really fly Tech 3s that often. Let's just look for it. Subsystems. Nope, don't find them here either. Let's see, maybe I can through this one. Required 4, there we go. So that's a BPC, which brings you to here, view market details, and that is in the ship and module modifications. That's where I should look for those. So ship and module modifications, subsystems, and we'll start with the MR one. So let's take a quick look at what's happening. Core subsystems. Well, very much in line with what you saw with the Legion price itself, driven by the event. More Legions, they were your go-to Tech 3 cruiser for that one, and so we bumped up towards 1 year high point, well above 40 million. We normalized pretty nicely here, 33.5 to 28 million, a little bit above average, but nothing too crazy. Dissolution sequencer, not too popular it seems for the event, so stuck at 22.5, which is close to the average for the year, definitely affordable. And then the energy parasitic complex, Also decently affordable at 25 million. We have a clear winner when it comes to popularity, and that should be a PvE platform, popular one, considering the spike that we're noticing here. On the defensive subsystem, we've got Covert that is very stable below 40 million, probably a popular one, considering it is the Covert reconfiguration, but maybe not for the event again. Augmented plating going for 40 million, a little bit of a spike here, and then the nanobot injector. Here is our winner for the event, 1 year high point at 55 million, normalizing at 40 million, so still a little bit expensive, right? It takes a little bit of time to absorb that extra demand from the event, but clearly, you know, different types of events could have different impacts on the most popular subsystem that people want to use on those Tech 3 cruisers. So it is a very interesting category that was requested here. Offensive assault optimization stuck at 30 million ISK. Liquid crystal magnifier expecting the bump here, considering it was for laser platforms that the event was so good, and there it is, up to 45 million. Not a 1 year high point, but definitely your second biggest spike, and you're still paying 41 for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. So again, it needs time. This was real demand that has caused real consumption that'll take some time for the market to fully normalize and get us back to that 35 million range. And then the support processor flat at 30, because that was not the build for the event, clearly. And then we get the MR propulsion subsystem. Galactic nanofiber is spiking now up to 40 million ISK, 41.5 to 30 million, so very expensive. Let's see if there's anything else. Interdiction nullifier spiking right now as well, 1 year high point. Yeah, 47 million for the sellers. Interesting, very big volume here as well. Doesn't feel like that's going to be event driven, but maybe something in Nullsec is happening. And then we get the wake limiter, that's also very expensive at 50 million, 32 for those buyers. They stay where they're at though, so they're willing to wait it out most of the time. But yeah, right now all MR propulsion subsystems are spiking towards 1 year high points, very, very expensive. And then you've got the meta / event driven winners that are slowly settling down, but still need a little bit of time to get back to those normal average prices in the other subsystems. Definitely a very interesting suggestion. Maybe I will try to add those in the rotation as well. Not really sure. As you guys know, I try to keep Eve Talk under an hour. It already takes quite a bit of effort on my Saturday morning every week. But yeah, this was super interesting. Although I do think it's, you know, by happenstance that this one is you know, showing such nice patterns compared to events that we can very clearly pin them to, which also the Legion showed. So maybe what we could do is you know, take a quick peek. If we spot something real happening in one of the base hulls, then take a quick look at the subsystems or something like that. I'm still thinking about how I could incorporate that without having to have like 4 extra categories to cycle through as well. Then I might check them maybe once every 3 months or so if I just do that. So we will see, but very interesting one. The MR subsystems here clearly showing impact and opportunity if you can spot those patterns before they happen. That's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Again, Happy New Year to all of you, and as always, I'll see you next time.
Please take extra care during our renovation. Please note sleeping in public places not allowed.